all women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus 8. Pain the Seed of Wisdom. Continuous Moral Development, written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. Pain the Seed of Wisdom. A field guide for men who still notice reality. The Asphalt Crucible. Why traffic, witch hunts, and the Fisher utopia are the forge of the masculine soul. You sit trapped in the gridlock of the morning commute, the modern Colosseum, where the steel beasts of the highway clash and your blood pressure spikes. In that moment, when some reckless idiot cuts you off, you face a choice that defines your soul. Do you succumb to the hysterical venting of a child? Or do you exert the stoic mastery of a man who understands that the world is raw chaos, requiring a decisive hand? This mundane agony is the first battleground against the lie of the new socialist utopia. A fantasy world where stress is viewed as a trauma rather than the essential friction that sharpens the mind and thickens the prefrontal cortex. While the cultural Marxists peddle the neurotic fantasy that safety is a human right, nature screams the opposite, that only through overcoming crisis do we forge the competence necessary to survive. We reject the pacifier of the safe space because we know that a man who cannot handle a 4-way stop without panic is destined to be a slave to those who can. This softening of the spirit is merely the appetizer for the main course of legal and social castration served to the modern male. We live in the era of the witch hunt, where the presumption of innocence has been strangled by the believe all women inquisition, turning every workplace into a Kafkaesque nightmare where a man's career can be vaporized by a whisper. The Duluth model and the HR department are not tools of justice, but the enforcement arms of a gynocentric regime that views male competence as a threat to be neutralized. They hack our biological instincts, turning our drive to protect into a weapon that compels us to destroy our own kind for the phantom approval of a system that despises us. They want you to believe that male and female are interchangeable economic units, shaming the very biology that makes us men and women with the absurdity of compulsory heterosexuality, trying to convince you that the fundamental drive of life is a prison. Enough is enough. You have been run over by the conspiracy of lies that disguises female solipsism as righteousness and covers the wickedness of the evolutionary parasite in the garb of victimhood. It is time to break the spell of ignorance and accept the brutal, beautiful truth that pain is not a bug, but a feature, the seed of wisdom. We are going to dismantle the woke Babylon with the trivium, using logic to slice through their emotional rhetoric and rhetoric to rally the spirits of men who are sick of being the scapegoats for a failing civilization. The road to redemption is paved with the uncomfortable truths about female nature and the necessity of hierarchy, so take a deep breath, because the only way out is through the fire. The crucible of the asphalt, stoic stability in a hysterical age. I watched a man, his face the color of bruised plum and contorted into a rictus of impotent rage, scream at a stopped Volvo in rush hour traffic, his spit flying against the windshield like the pathetic spittle of a dying ideology. This creature, stripped of his masculine vitality by a culture that demands he apologize for his own testosterone, is the road rage beta. a soy-encrusted casualty of the war on reality. There he sat, trapped in a steel cage of his own making, enslaved by a hysterical emotional response to a trivial delay. This is not mere anger. It is the biological cry of a man who has lost his sovereignty to the winds of cultural Marxism. Without the grounding force of masculine discipline, he is a leaf blown by the gales of leftist dogma, unable to distinguish between a genuine threat to his survival and a mere inconvenience on the highway. He has been taught that the world should cater to his feelings, so when the world inevitably fails to comply, his psyche fractures like cheap porcelain. The modern academic priesthood and their media handmaidens peddle a pernicious lie that stress is a trauma to be avoided, a pathological scar on the otherwise pristine utopia of the human mind. This is the safe space delusion, a neurotic fiction designed to cripple the population into dependence on the state. Evolutionary biology, however, screams the truth that the left seeks to suppress. Stress is the sole mechanism for neurogenesis and the thickening of the prefrontal cortex. The very physical seat of wisdom, your gray matter builds its architecture only in the fires of resistance. When you are cut off in traffic, your body floods with cortisol, not because the universe is evil, but because your biology demands you adapt, overcome, and grow. The Marxist narrative that comfort is the default state of humanity is a denial of physics. The struggle is the catalyst for the evolution of the mind. Consider the irritation of gridlock not as a bug in the system, but as a feature, a necessary friction to grind down the ego and polish the soul, much like the flagellation routines of the early monastic traditions of Christendom. The early church fathers understood that the flesh must be subject to the spirit, and they sought hardship to ensure it. Today, you need not scourge yourself in a desert cell. You need only drive on the I-95 during Friday rush hour. The mundane agony of the stop and go is the modern equivalent of the via negativa, the path of negation where the illusion of control is stripped away. It is here, in the banal torture of the asphalt crucible, that you have the opportunity to separate your eternal consciousness from the temporary frustration of the flesh, turning a red light into a moment of spiritual transcendence. When a reckless driver swerves into your lane, forcing your heart into your throat, your physiology offers you a choice between two distinct paths: the hysterical reaction of the feminine or the mastery of the masculine. The feminine mode, which has been relentlessly injected into the male psyche by feminist social engineers, demands venting, emotional processing, and a theatrical display of victimhood. It seeks external validation for internal panic. The stoic masculine mode, however, recognizes the biological arousal for what it is: raw fuel. The rational man suppresses the emotional scream to execute a complex maneuver safely, channeling the adrenaline into heightened awareness and precise motor control. He does not freeze or weep, he acts. This is the biological imperative of the protector, the hunter and the builder, silenced for decades but now reawakening in the hearts of men who refuse to be victims. We must violently reject the emotional support animal culture that seeks to soothe rather than strengthen, a culture that tells men they are fragile, broken things in need of a comfort blanket and a participation trophy. Handling a crisis with calm competence is the ultimate rejection of the victimhood narrative peddled by the left. Look at the statistics. Men are currently dying by suicide at rates nearly 4 times that of women in the West, driven into despair by a society that pathologizes their nature and denies them their purpose. To soothe a man in crisis is to kill him. To challenge him to master it is to save him. The road does not care about your feelings, and neither does the universe, which is the greatest gift it can give you. The universe demands you be competent, not coddled, and in that demand lies your salvation. You can instantly evaluate a man's worth his inherent logos by observing his reaction to a sudden, loud noise or a near-miss accident. This is the crisis metric. The man who maintains a steady heart rate while others scream is the inheritor of the Western logos, the torch-bearer of civilization. While the hysterical mass clutches their pearls and demands a ban on loud noises, the stoic man assesses the threat, mitigates the damage, and moves forward. It is no coincidence that the same demographic screeching for safe spaces on college campuses cannot merge onto a highway without causing a pileup. They have been rendered incompetent by a philosophy that equates safety with virtue, whereas the masculine mind knows that safety is often a luxury purchased with vigilance. The traffic of life is the ultimate moral testing ground, the modern Colosseum, where we pit our competence against the raw chaos of reality. Unlike the controlled theoretical environments of the new socialist utopia where Mark Fisher's ghost still laughs at the flat, suffocating consistency of capitalist realism pretending to be equity, the road is raw, unfiltered, and indifferent. It requires immediate, decisive action rather than theoretical platitudes. There is no equity in a merging lane. There is only the right of way, physics, and timing. This is where the rubber meets the road, quite literally. The man who navigates this chaos without losing his cool is not just a good driver. He is a practicing Stoic philosopher engaging in the most authentic form of cognitive behavioral therapy available to the modern man. Apply the trivium to the four-way stop and you will see how order in the mind creates order in the world. Grammar is the recognition of the reality before you. 4 cars, 4 stop signs, a set of rules. Logic is the assessment of arrival times and the sequence of turns, a calculation devoid of emotion but rooted in absolute fairness. Rhetoric is the non-verbal communication, the nod of acknowledgement or the firm hand on the wheel that signals your intent to others. When you see a man hesitate at a stop sign, wavering in a terrified fog of politeness, you see a man who has failed the trivium. He has failed to define the world, grammar, failed to reason his place in it, logic, and failed to assert his existence, rhetoric. The road demands you be a rational agent, a sovereign individual acting in accordance with the laws of physics and logic. It is a daily rehearsal for the reclaiming of our civilization, one turn signal at a time. That four-way stop was a crucible for your soul, a microscopic proving ground where the logos either reigns supreme or recedes before the hysterical tide of the Marxist lie. This failure to impose masculine order in the small things is the fractal seed of the coming catastrophe, when the individual male surrenders his divine spark to the suffocating embrace of the state. He dooms the collective to the same rot that once devoured the mightiest empires on earth. We must widen our gaze beyond the asphalt to recognize the pattern of this decay written in blood across the ages. The architecture of lies, deconstructing the Fisherite utopia. Look at the graveyard of empires and tell you see progress. I see a cycle of suicide. Sparta did not fall to the superior firepower of Thebes, but to the internal rot of gynocentric indulgence, diluting its warrior caste with wealth and softness until it was a hollow shell waiting to be crushed. The Soviet Union collapsed not merely because of economic sanctions, but because it tried to engineer a lie that the exceptional man is interchangeable with the mediocre collective. History is not a straight line ascending into a multicultural paradise. It is a roller coaster of rise and fall, and every single descent is triggered when a civilization decides that the masculine standard, the very engine of its survival, is too toxic to maintain. When you relax the boundaries of the state, you invite the barbarian. And when you relax the boundaries of sexual morality, you invite the collapse of the family unit. The economic illiteracy of the left would be hilarious if it weren't so devastating. They preach the zero-sum game, viewing wealth as a finite pie that must be sliced thinner and thinner to feed the ungrateful. But they ignore the obvious masculine innovation bakes the pie. It invents the wheat, designs the oven, and creates the energy grid that powers the entire operation. The leftist is a bureaucratic leech, a parasite that mistakes the host for the environment, believing that resources simply exist in a state of nature to be redistributed. When you hear them whine about income inequality, realize you are listening to the biological cry of a failure who hates the competent. The red pill economic truth is that wealth is created by the male mind wrestling with reality, not by the feminist professor wringing her hands over pronouns. Schopenhauer identified envy as the true source of human suffering, a wretchedness that poisons the soul, and nowhere is this more visible today than in the doctrine of feminism. It is not an ideology of justice, it is a sophisticated psychological projection of female solipsism and a seething malevolent envy toward masculine competence. They look at the massive edifice of civilization, the skyscrapers, the power grids, the sewage systems, and feel a sickening resentment because they did not build it. This is why male suicide rates are skyrocketing. The narrative demands men apologize for their own nature until they extinguish themselves. It is the tantrum of a toddler who wants the steering wheel but refuses to learn how to drive, preferring instead to smash the dashboard and scream that the car is oppressive. This pathology birthed a nanny state, a projection of the toxic mother figure into the machinery of government. The state becomes the suffocating, abusive matriarch who refuses to let her son grow up, demanding total obedience in exchange for the illusion of security. This is the ultimate infantilization of man. He is reduced to a dependent child, forbidden from individuating, forbidden from facing the necessary pain that forges a masculine soul. The family courts are the enforcement arm of this toxic mother, stripping fathers of their children and their assets, acting as a hive of vindictiveness that ensures the son can never escape the shadow of the matriarchy. She offers a warm hug, but that hug is a stranglehold, turning the population into a giant nursing infant that cannot even change its own tires, let alone defend its borders. Look at the aesthetic of this feminist utopia they sell us. It is pastel, soft, sterile, and profoundly boring. It is a world where everything is padded with foam, where no one can fail, and consequently, no one can truly succeed. Contrast this with the Gothic tradition of the West: flying buttresses, jagged peaks, shadows, and danger. True beauty requires risk. The sublime is found in the tension between life and death. The left seeks to remove risk to remove beauty, creating a safe, padded room where the human spirit withers away in a haze of bureaucratic safety regulations. They want a world without pain, forgetting that pain is the seed of wisdom, and without it, we are merely cattle, awaiting the slaughter. Biologically, this drive for equity is a poison, a maladaptive mechanism that threatens the survival of our species. The left frames it as lifting the floor, but in reality, it is a frantic attempt to lower the ceiling. It is the crab bucket mentality incarnate. If the exceptional man cannot be dragged down by force, he must be dragged down by regulation. This violates the fundamental law of nature, survival of the fittest. By incentivizing paternity fraud and the decoupling of sex from consequence, where the cuckoldry rate is estimated to be as high as 10 to 30%, depending on the socio-economic bracket, they invert evolution. They reward the cheater and punish the provider, a genetic dead end that will inevitably result in the collapse of any culture stupid enough to embrace it. The Fisherite concept of a new socialist utopia is the ultimate logical fallacy, a category error of epic proportions. Perfection is a divine attribute, not a bureaucratic one. Every time a regime attempts to perfect human nature through coercion, they do not create angels. They create gulags. They create a hell on earth where the dissenter is squashed for the crime of noticing reality. The quest for a perfect world inevitably requires the elimination of imperfect humans, which is why every left-wing revolution ends with a pile of bodies and a mountain of lies. You cannot legislate morality, and you cannot police people into being good. You can only threaten them into submission, which is the hallmark of tyranny. The only cure for this madness is a brutal re-education, not in the Marxist sense, but in the classical sense. We must return to the Western canon, the grammar of reality that teaches us life is suffering, that hardship is the forge of virtue, and that only the strong can make meaning of the chaos. We need to teach men about the tragic nature of existence again. When a young man reads the Stoics or the Greeks, he understands that the world is not here to cater to his feelings. This inoculates him against the siren song of the woke mob. The remedy is truth, spoken plainly and without apology, weaponized to smash the delusions of the modern Babylon and set the spirit free. Armed with the grammar of reality found in the canon, we can finally expose the specific mechanics of this cultural assassination. The abstract decline of civilization is not a distant historical event. It is happening in real time, facilitated by a corporate apparatus that has been hijacked to serve the jealous whims of the incompetent. We see the theoretical enviousness of the cultural Marxists transform into a practical weapon of destruction, a system designed not to build value, but to scalp the men who create it. To understand the depth of this betrayal, we need look no further than the modern office where the witch hunt has replaced the job review. The Inquisition of the witch, the double standard in sexual harassment claims. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of a Fortune 500 conglomerate, I watched a titan of industry, a man I will call Thomas, have his career surgically removed by a whisper campaign. Thomas was a high-performance machine, a man who generated revenue like a dynamo, but his sin was not incompetence. It was his refusal to bow to the mediocrity of a resentful female subordinate who viewed his competence as a threat. Without a single piece of empirical evidence, without a witness, and without a single email verifying her claim, she merely pointed a finger and invoked the magic words, uncomfortable. The machinery of the corporation ground to a halt, and the HR inquisitors arrived not to investigate, but to execute. This is the modern corporate purge, where the automatic trust placed in female allegations acts as a tactical nuclear weapon, utilized by less competent actors to sabotage the men who actually keep the lights on. You must look to the cold, hard logic of evolutionary biology to understand why men fall for this scam. For millennia, the male brain was hardwired with a damsel in distress subroutine. To protect women was to protect the future of the tribe. Feminists, those ruthless social engineers, have hacked this biological imperative and weaponized it. They rely on the white knight impulse, a biological glitch where men destroy their own tribal cohesion for the fleeting promise of female approval, an approval that never comes, by the way. These men, emasculated by cultural Marxism, rush to defend the damsel, oblivious to the fact that they are merely useful idiots in a game where they are the next target for disposal. It is a sick, parasitic manipulation of our own biology. This brings us to the Human Resources Department, a misnomer if there ever was one. HR is not a resource for humans. It is the enforcement arm of the cultural Marxist matriarchy, a modern star chamber where due process goes to die. I have sat in those rooms watching men condemned by kangaroo courts, where the rules of evidence are replaced by the feelings of the mediocre. These departments exist solely to protect the corporation from liability, not to find the truth, and they will sacrifice a man's livelihood on the altar of safety without a single shred of hesitation. It is a Kafkaesque nightmare where the accusation itself is the evidence of guilt. The legal foundation of this madness is the dogma, believe all women, a phrase that should terrify anyone who values the transcendent living spirit of Western civilization. For 1,000 years, our ancestors fought to establish the golden mean of jurisprudence, the presumption of innocence, innocent until proven guilty. This gynocentric regime flips this ancient wisdom on its head, ushering in a tyrannical era of guilty until proven innocent. This is not justice, it is a legal abomination, a return to the witch trials where mere testimony was enough to hang a man. Only now, the noose is made of ruined reputations and destroyed families. Consider the linguistic alchemy involved in this deceit. The shift from the word victim to survivor is a rhetorical sleight of hand designed to grant unearned moral authority. A victim requires objective evidence and a perpetrator. A survivor requires only a subjective narrative. By adopting this terminology, they elevate personal feeling above objective truth, creating a grammatical shortcut that bypasses the need for facts. It is a cancer on the search for truth, allowing the subjective whims of the hysterical to supersede the objective reality of the event. This gaslighting extends to the domestic front with the Duluth model, a feminist theoretical framework that should be classified as a hate crime against men. It posits that domestic violence is exclusively male-perpetrated, ignoring the mountain of data showing that violence is often reciprocal. The media and the academy actively suppress the reality of female-perpetrated abuse against men, erasing the suffering of fathers and husbands who are beaten, mocked, and then silenced by a system that refuses to acknowledge their pain. If you look at the arrest rates for fathers commenting on family court corruption or the suicide rates of divorced men, you see the bloody fingerprints of this ideology. So, what is the remedy? we must pursue a strategy of radical masculine self-interest. You must treat the workplace not as a community, but as a hostile environment occupied by an ideological enemy seeking to destroy the provider. Document every interaction, record every conversation if legal. Never be alone with a woman behind a closed door. Leave the door open and let the light of transparency disinfect the room of potential accusation. Furthermore, we must argue for the return of male-only spaces, sanctuaries where the transcendental values of brotherhood can exist without the destabilizing influence of female presence and the constant threat of false accusation. We must rebuild the masculine sphere, brick by brick, where men can speak the truth without fear of the inquisitor's knock. The bureaucratic hellscape and the legal lynching of the masculine spirit are not random errors. They are the inevitable, bloody harvest of a philosophy that hates nature itself. To understand why the system wants you dead, you must understand the source code of the enemy. We are not dealing with a misunderstanding, but with a deliberate metaphysical assassination of the truth. We must expose the specific architect of this lie who dared to call your biology a conspiracy and the heterosexual imperative a form of oppression. Unbinding the lie, the reality of compulsory heterosexuality and the natural order. I regard Adrienne Rich's 1980 essay, Compulsory Heterosexuality, as the quintessential example of a neurotic linguistic exercise designed to shame the biological reality that men and women are distinct, complementary poles necessary for the propagation of the species. She attempts to argue that heterosexuality is not a biological imperative, but a violently imposed political institution. A lie so blatant it requires a complete suspension of disbelief to digest. This is the hallmark of the leftist pathology, to take the most fundamental obvious truth of the animal kingdom, that the will to life drives us to reproduce, and frame it as a conspiracy of patriarchal oppression. To accept this drivel is to deny the very engine of existence, yet this is the foundation upon which the modern gender wars are built. This attack on nature is nothing less than a war on the logos, a demonic, chaotic force that seeks to unmake creation itself because it resents the hierarchy inherent in biological design. Feminism and queer theory are not liberation movements. They are a rebellion against the order of the cosmos, a bitter resentment of the structure that allows life to flourish. By framing the distinct roles of the sexes as oppression, these ideologies invite sterility and chaos. We see the result of this war in the statistics of cultural decay. Billions of babies aborted without a right to life. A staggering death toll driven by a philosophy that detests the very consequences of the sexual act. This is the face of the woke Babylon, a culture that consumes its own young to sustain the illusion of autonomy. I assert that refuting this social constructivist view of gender is essential because the will to life is heterosexual by default, a biological imperative written into every cell of our bodies. To claim otherwise, to suggest that gender is a mere performance or a social construct, is to identify oneself as a symptom of late-stage decay, akin to the moral rot that preceded the collapse of Rome. Deviation from this norm is not a liberation, but a signal of a civilization that has lost its will to survive. The pain we feel watching our culture wither is the seed of wisdom. It is the sharp slap of reality, waking us from the coma of cultural Marxism. We must accept that biology is not a suggestion, and the pain of this realization is the first step toward reclaiming our sanity. We must re-enchant the view of men and women as metaphysical opposites, logos and eros. Men are the principle of logos, reason, structure, direction, while women embody eros, emotion, receptivity, the chaotic force of life itself. To attempt to blend these into an androgynous sludge, as modern feminism demands, is to destroy the magic of the dynamic. True happiness comes not from blurring these roles, but from embracing the stark, undeniable reality that we are spiritual souls designed to complete one another. The modern lie tells us we are interchangeable economic units, but this reductionist view strips us of our humanity and leaves us hollow, isolated, and desperate for a connection that the current paradigm cannot provide. I speak now the brutally honest red pill on female nature, a subject the modern world cowers in fear to address. The cunning required for the evolutionary survival of the female manifests today as hypergamy, a biological drive to seek the best genetic material and the most resources. A man must navigate this reality with his eyes wide open, understanding that the naive beta who blindly worships the sacred feminine, without understanding her nature, is destined to be cuckolded. Genetic studies confirming that a significant percentage of men unknowingly raise children that are not their own, or stripped of his assets in a family court system where women initiate approximately 70% of divorces. If you ignore the evolutionary reality of female nature, you walk blindly into a machine designed to grind you into dust. The consequence of ignoring these truths is the singles market catastrophe, a sterile hedonistic outcome of believing the lie that men and women are rivals rather than partners. We see plummeting birth rates in the West as a direct result, and alongside it a skyrocketing male suicide rate, with men dying of suicide at nearly 3 times the rate of women. Why? Because men have been stripped of their purpose, told their natural assertiveness is toxic, and left to rot in a society that despises them. The gender war has produced a generation of lonely men and miserable empowered women trapped in a cycle of blame and isolation that serves no one but the architects of our decline. The only way to reverse this curse is to remedy the rot by returning to a courtly but patriarchal structure where men are permitted to lead and women are cherished for their specific virtues. I call for a structure where men take up the burden of leadership and women are protected and valued, not for being bad copies of men, but for being the embodiment of the feminine. Pain is the seed of wisdom because it forces the acceptance of these uncomfortable biological truths. And only through this acceptance can the West be saved. We must weaponize the truth, smash down the modern lies, and build a future where the living spirit of Western civilization is allowed to breathe once again. You have swallowed the red pill, and I know it tastes like ash and gunpowder, because the truth of this modern Babylon is never sweet. It is a jagged pill that cuts on the way down. You realize that the traffic jam wasn't just bad luck. It was a moral colosseum testing your stoic mettle against the chaotic, incompetent hordes who would rather wail in victimhood than steer their destiny. We looked into the new socialist utopia and saw it for the pathetic, Fisherite hallucination. It is a sterile, safe space where the state plays the suffocating, toxic mother, preventing you from ever achieving the autonomy of a grown man. You have witnessed the Kafkaesque nightmare of the HR Inquisition, where a man's life is forfeit based on a whisper, while the suicide rates of divorced fathers and the systemic cuckoldry of the family court are ignored as statistical anomalies by the lying press. We even surgically removed the cancer of Adrienne Rich's delusions to expose the raw biological reality that men and women are opposing poles of logos and eros, distinct and divine, and that trying to blend them into an androgynous sludge is the signature of a dying civilization. Now, you stand armed with the only weapon that can turn the tide, the trivium. You possess the grammar to name the evil of cultural Marxism, the logic to dismantle the double standards that favor the mediocre, and the rhetoric to humiliate the liars in the public square without breaking a sweat. You understand that the pain of these realizations, the crushing weight of the false narratives you were fed, is the necessary friction that polishes the soul. Do not hoard this wisdom like a miser in a bunker. The West is burning, and the experts are pouring gasoline on the fire while calling it rain. Take these hard, undeniable truths, wield them with the ruthless precision of a Roman general, and drag your brothers out of the cave. Go forth, rebuild the culture, and become the pillar of strength that your ancestors would have recognized proud and unbroken. And now the sponsored book introduction. Pain, the seed of wisdom, continuous moral development. You were lied to, not just once. Every day by the school, the media, the church, the law, even your own family. They told you pain is evil, that masculinity is a flaw, that your duty is to apologize for existing. They said strength is aggression, leadership is oppression, and discipline is repression. They told you to be soft, to blend in, to submit. And when you did, you felt empty, not safer, not freer, just numb. And then one day, the numbness cracked. Maybe it was betrayal, a woman who promised loyalty but left you bleeding, a friend who called you brother but sold you out, a job that demanded your soul and gave you scraps. Or worse, the silence, the slow rot of knowing you're meant for more but not knowing how to break out. I've lived that. I've stared into the void after losing everything: respect, relationships, direction. I've been called toxic for standing tall, called angry for speaking truth, called delusional for believing in honor. And I've watched strong men collapse under the weight of lies, not bullets. That's why this book exists. Not because I'm special, because I survived. And I learned, pain is not the enemy. It is the teacher. The sharper the cut, the deeper the lesson. Every scar I carry maps a truth the world doesn't want you to know. This book is not for the weak, not for the comfortable, not for those who want to feel good about doing nothing. It is for men who have bled, who have been used, who have seen through the mask of modernity and felt the sickness beneath. If you are one of them, this book will feel like remembering, like waking up. It will give you language for what you've always known but couldn't say. It will name the demons: feminism, cultural Marxism, emotional blackmail, the war on fatherhood, the neutering of brotherhood, and show you how to fight back with clarity, not rage. You will learn why masculinity is not toxic, it is sacred. Why leadership is not about control, it's about sacrifice. Why vulnerability, when misused, is a weapon against men. Why women are not your enemies, but the system that corrupts their nature is. You will see how pain is not a flaw in the design, but the design itself. How suffering carves wisdom into bone. How every trial is a test of whether you will become a man or remain a boy. You will learn how to build brotherhood in a world that isolates men. How to lead when no one follows. How to stand when the world demands you kneel. This is not theory. This is battle-tested truth from the forge of real loss, from the fire of betrayal, from the silence after the scream. If you are not ready for that, close this book now, give it to someone who is. Or better yet, go watch a Netflix series, scroll TikTok, believe the lies, pretend the rot isn't spreading. But if you feel the hunger, if you know something is wrong and you refuse to be quiet, then keep reading. This is your war manual, your spiritual code, your return to order. The world doesn't need more weak men pretending to be strong. It needs strong men who refuse to pretend. This book is for you and you alone. Pain the Seed of Wisdom, Continuous Moral Development, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.